Um, partly just I will discuss just ontology building, although obviously other tutorials have gone over that. I'm going to go over my specific way of presenting or present ontology development, but then also the specifics of MAxO and what I include, what I don't include, how we're planning to use it. Here, let me see if I can share screen. Share. And please, I'm probably not going to see messages in there, so if somebody could shout out questions, I will do my best to go through this, but not having a slide deck, I might jump back and forth. I will try to be clear, but please let me know if I'm not being clear. So I was encouraged by Nicole and Nico to do a better job with my README file and have more explanations of what is medical action ontology, MAxO, how I've developed it, just different governance, etc. My README file, I need to work on my markdown skills, but the information is there. So MAxO has a broad view of medical actions and includes procedures, interventions, therapies, treatments, and recommendations. And particularly, I am part of Monarch, as many of you are, and we are interested in rare disease, and we're interested in computationally looking at rare disease. This is an older figure that I have adapted. It was originally made in 2018, looking at some of Fanconi anemia and other diseases, and how we can break down or show a picture of these using ontologies. So Fanconi anemia is here. It's actually several different subtypes, and it has been shown that various genes give rise to these different types of Fanconi anemia. And we use, Mondo to represent the different subtypes of Fanconi anemia here, and use Go ontology, as pretty much all of you are familiar with, to represent the genes that are associated, that give rise to, that have variants in them that give rise to these different diseases. Fanconi anemia has several phenotypes that are associated with them, that have variable expression. MAxO ontology, which is the dark blue, you can use different medical actions such as chromosomal breakage analysis to use as a diagnostic procedure to identify if differential diagnosis of Fanconi anemia. Acquired aplastic anemia has an overlap in a number of different phenotypes, but would not show chromosomal breakage. So by using a diagnostic and finding chromosomal breakage, you would identify Fanconi anemia versus acquired aplastic anemia. There's an overlap here. Another diagnostic procedure is you might look at blood cell count for neutropenia or anemia. Acquired aplastic anemia is not known to be to occur from a germline variant, but exposures in the environment can be risk factors for acquired aplastic anemia, and that can be encoded by ecto or exposure ontology. MAxO additionally has medical recommendations to avoid exposures particularly if you're talking about, say, radiation, maybe avoid some radiation therapies if you have acquired aplastic anemia or are at risk of contracting acquired aplastic anemia. And so what most people think of medical actions are treatments. And of course, MAxO does include treatments, including pharmacotherapies, which can treat anemia or other phenotypes as well. So I'm going to go back to, let's see. There are several top-level classes identified in MAxO, some of which I just identified, like diagnostic procedures, preventative therapeutics. The therapeutic procedures where the bulk of terms are, and also medical action avoidance for some terms you might radiograph. Imaging avoidance might be your recommendation for your current state. Something I like to do, this is Protégé for those who are familiar with it. This is one of the best ways to view an ontology. And you can, look at MAxO here and go through all the top level terms. This is more helpful for making an image or for a presentation, but sometimes I do like to use this ontograph. If you're not familiar, here, I'll close this so you can see that only the top level terms. If you're not familiar with this view in Protégé, you can go Window, Views, Class Views, and you can see ontograph, and you can add that in. Again, it's not very helpful for understanding an ontology, but it could be helpful for a talk. So these are the top level terms in MAxO. I'm not going to click on therapeutic procedure because you can see there are a ton of different terms here, but palliative care, there's relatively few. It is separated because for pain management and hospice care, you're not treating or preventing anything. You're providing comfort for people at the end of life. So those are added separately. Diagnostic, here, let me close these. Diagnostic procedures are the tests, assessments, potentially biomarker terms that help you identify, diagnose the diseases, but also can be for ongoing monitoring of different treatments, etc. There are relatively few in the complementary alternative therapy. I'll get into a little bit of how and why these are included. It's unlikely there'll be an extreme expansion in this area. One question we get a lot, we have a number of actual avoidance terms because there are a lot of recommendations that you avoid certain procedures if you have a particular disease state, or you avoid certain supplementations or things like that. And so this is present here for those additional types of recommendations that that are often suggested in rare disease. So we have a few.
Ovi, I have one question. Do you have multiple inheritance, or is everything just classified under one type of
It is multiple inheritance. We've tried not to do it like manually adding a number of inheritance, but some of the we're trying to go back and add logical definitions, and so when they're inferred, they can have a multiple inheritance, but there are exceptions currently, and so yes, the short answer is yes. And we tried to do that through our logical definitions, but it's not 100%.
Cool. Is that obo graph showing the asserted view or the inferred view? Can you go back to the obo graph? Because I haven't really used that very much.
It doesn't matter. It will do either of them. Trying to think of it's only showing things under medical action. So if it's enter process, I'd have to think about that. Think of a use case to see if that's true.
Yeah, that'd be nice if it would show like the inferred parents or something too. Well, I think there was like a dotted line at some point.
Yeah, that is because it also is to avoid. So it's negative action. So
cool.
Yes.
Nice.
But let's see.
Yeah, that obo graph seems fun.
It is fun, but there's some definite quirks about it, and it if you need to rearrange a lot of terms to make it, talk ready, it can be a pain. But yeah, it is fun. Term inclusion. So this is just the general breakdown. In the end, it's going to be a term by term basis, but information entities are not included. So clinical tests are, but the clinical results are not. Recommendations for therapy and treatment or prevention are included. Life skills are not. This, I will say, is still an open ticket, so it is still under discussion, but hearing aid usage and speech therapy, yes, are included. Sign language is education is not. So another discussion that often comes up is this is for medical recommendations. So clinical tests are, but purely research lab tests are not. There are some overlap, but I think, when you're talking about, it comes up quite a bit, is biomarkers. There are a lot of papers that are written about, gene expression modules that, show this is a biomarker for a particular cancer or not. And, I'm research author on papers like that. However, and it's not a hard and fast rule, but if it's not a CLIA lab recommended biomarker assay, we're not going to include them in MAxO. But if they are biomarkers that have been validated and are used in labs, then we will include them. So supplementation and alternative therapies, this is again a case-by-case basis. Supplementation, obviously, of amino acid or vitamins, yes, of course, we'll add them. In many rare diseases, there are deficiencies in these in vitamin processing, synthesis, etc. So it is required, or sometimes it's critical that you avoid a particular vitamin supplementation. Chiropractor therapy, it could be a little controversial to some, but there are studies, well-known studies, that have found it to be therapeutic and can be recommended, or is often recommended by clinical or medical professionals. Currently, herbal supplementation is not. If it is found that a particular herbal supplement is efficacious in a certain disease and we have a use case, then they will be added. But currently, it is outside the realm of MAxO. And sorry about the formatting here. I'm still working on my markdown skills, but there are several obo ontologies that are imported, and we use this to build our logical definitions. and embryo, Hudon, Kebi, Uberon are pretty heavily used. MAxO again is used in this. This is for medical action avoidance. We use them in our logical definition. I'll show you a little bit more how these are used in the next part. So for MAxO curation, for MAxO, and the rules will be different for different ontologies, but we do lean heavily into DOS-DP templates because a lot of our ontology has been built like this. And I'll show you a little more in detail of how I use them. But if you want to learn how to use DOS-DP templates for yours, there's a tutorial that is already out there. Also, for all of my curation, I have notes and user guides in my wiki. If you're not aware, wikis are at the top here. I have different how-tos there. Oops. Some people have read the docs. I've never used that. Possibly it'll be migrated there, but I will try to update the links if that's the case. Manual additions via Protege. I think most of you are aware there's also an obo tutorial on Protege, but adding terms here, this is this is what they the terms look like with synonyms, different definitions, and various other information within there. As I said, and I'll touch a little bit on robot templates. This is another way to build a term. There's also, clearly the formatting needs help, but there's also another wiki entry on how to build robot templates. Let's see. For DOS-DP templates, I think in all ontologies, or at least all ODK ontologies, they're in pretty much the same place. I use it on my computer, but you can navigate via my GitHub repo. And if you would like to add terms to MAxO for your own use, or you see something that is wrong, please add requests to the GitHub. If you would like to build something yourself, please check out all these different DOS-DP templates, because some of the terms that you might recommend would fall under one of these patterns, like a protein measurement or protein measurement in blood, surgical repair, swab and location. That has obviously come up a lot in COVID the past few years, that sort of thing. So these patterns, if you did not see the obo tutorial, I do recommend you go back and look at all the pieces, parts of it. I'm not going to explain everything about this, but at the top you should have what this pattern is. Note if there's another pattern that's somewhat similar. I recently had to break apart this transplantation pattern because it was pointed out that the logical definition wasn't appropriate for all transplantation. Sometimes you transplant part of something, part of a liver versus a whole kidney. And so the logical definitions need to be differentiated based on what you're transplanting. So without going through all the mechanics, just to note that this pattern can build the label. %s is the variable, location is I call it location, but it's an Uberon location, so a location on the body. So liver transplantation or skin transplantation. You can build in as many synonyms as you like, and I do like to use that. We have use cases to have many different types of synonyms for text mining uses. You can have it build a textual definition, and critically important for us is we also have a logical definition that is generated when using these DOS-DP patterns. Oh, sorry. So with this, you need a TSV file to tell it what terms to build, which I think most of you will understand. Let's see. Oops, sorry, got a little anxious. So historically, for the reasons, mine is under manual, but it should be in the data folder. And so these are all the TSV files that are associated with each of the terms or each of the patterns. And this is the transplantation one that I was just showing you. It goes with this pattern here. And the name has to be transplantation by location has to be the same as the transplantation by location YAML file. The great thing about this is how flexible this is. There are only a couple of columns that have to be there. There's, obviously the MAxO ID that it's associated with. I showed you in the pattern, it will build the name of it. However, if you want to override the name, you can type, bone grafting instead of bone transplantation is what it would have automatically been. You need the ontology you're importing from term. So whatever the Uberon term is in this case. You don't need an ORCID ID or date. It will still make your term. However, obviously that's important for, provenance to have this information here. You can override the definition if you'd like, if you want something more specific or whatnot. Oh, one thing I should point out, one reason I override labels is because Uberon has a very specific way of calling some locations, like zone of skin. You would never say zone of skin transplantation. So often in those cases, I override them. There also a lot of times when, not an example, but like if, heart transplantation, but you may, or no, here's a good example, partial lung transplantation or lobe of lung transplantation. You want at least the label to be something you might actually call the procedure, but you can leave it in for different synonyms or whatnot. So that is important for being able to have a readable ontology. One thing that's also advantageous, you can add a comment here, you can add an xref to another, to wherever, it doesn't matter. Xref, there are standards on it. It has to be, a certain number of letters and then colon and a certain number of digits afterwards. And so it's a reference. So it's a reference to a PubMed article or another ontology or whatnot. You can add synonyms, and this field is the only field you can add multiple things. So with this bar that's present here, you can separate different synonym terms. And in this case, there are 2 synonyms added. And just, that's the cord blood. So we can, yeah, this one, I'll show you. Oh, I've already done it. All right. So this is running, by integrating this, you have the label, you have the definition that was built from the pattern, you have the synonym that you put in manually. This is one that the synonym that is built by the pattern. This is another synonym. It's abbreviation for umbilical cord blood transplantation, and then it has other properties here. And of course, the logical definition is here. And just if you're not aware, any term in protege that has the 3 lines here means that it does have a logical definition. And so if the reasoner is turned on, it can be inferred to be associated with it. This does at the moment go under process, but also with the logical definition, it is found to be also has a parent term transplantation procedure. And it's under introduction procedure is another. No, that's what transplantation is, a child of introduction procedure. So that's just roughly how it's used. Let's see. Going back to MAxO, let's see. README. So one other thing I can show you is, let me go back to the robot templates module. Under templates, if you want to add the robot terms by using robot, it is here. Nicole has been the only person who has added them. One thing, this is great. This is a great way to add a number of terms, which we need, and they have definitions and everything. Later, I may pull out these two. These are kind of obvious that may belong in a DOS-DP pattern. It just, you take these out and put them in the MAxO IDs into the TSV for the DOS-DP term, and that just make sure you include all the additional information that the person has added in. But this is definitely very helpful for building MAxO. Nicole could probably tell you a little bit more about how the robot addition works. I don't regularly use this, but for robot templates, you do need a parent class label for it. So it'll know where to put the term.
I can comment on it if you want. I'm on my phone now because our power went out. But yeah, the robot templates are really awesome. They're they're kind of similarly set up as the DOSDP templates, where you bring in your IDs that you want, labels and such. You may notice on line 2, on row 2, that there's this, these are the specified robot commands. So these are like super critical. And Sabrina and I could both tell you about all the times we've had to like bang our head against the wall and troubleshoot because we've formatted things like just the tiniest bit wrong, or we have introduced like a lot of different errors and had a lot of lessons learned. And Sabrina even created like a page on the obo-academy site about troubleshooting robot. I think it's on the obo-academy site. So yeah, we've so it's really nice once you get it working properly. And OB is a really good place to look. The Ontology of Biomedical Investigations. So James Overton and Becky Jackson are the ones that started robot, and they work a lot with OB. So OB adds all their terms exclusively using robot templates. So I often go to their GitHub repo to look for templates, and I know that they've set them up properly and they're working properly. So but then also we've stored some of our templates in the Mondo repo, and then I stored this one in the MAxO repo for Lee to use. So we do have tutorials on robot in the obo-academy too. So I definitely recommend if you have like multiple terms to add, even if it's more than like a few, adding to the robot template once you have a template ready to go and working, it's way faster and it's really satisfying.
Well, thank you. That there's some good tips in there that helps. One thing just to note, also we use in templates are replaced or obsoleted. Almost everything should be, virtually everything is replaced by, not truly obsoleted, meaning that an older term is now redirected to a newer term for whatever reason, generally because a lot of these terms that I added were overly broad or just I add them pretty pretty early on, but you just use this formatting to obsolete them and then add the term that would be used. So smoking avoidance, there's actually another term for smoking avoidance. And that's pretty much it on the curation. Governance, please, anybody add GitHub tickets. I've been a little bit slow this summer on for putting in new terms, but I am definitely interested. We've gotten to kind of a critical mass and people are using it, and now it's a little bit slower in adding terms because where things go and how things go, and if the logical definition is correct is takes a little bit longer, but I'm definitely interested in your input. You can just add, again, my formatting isn't the best, but if just add a GitHub ticket, if you just know of a term, this is missing, write it down. It would be better if you add definitions, or what you think the logical definition is, or which DOS-TP pattern it could be, or the more information you put in there, the quicker it'll be added. If you are gifted, you can do a pull request, and just keep in mind that DOS-TP robot templates are available and in use. Please tag me for review, and if I can't review it, I'll tag somebody else who might be able to help. Go to the GitHub wiki for how-to guide if you want to know specific ways of looking at things, or integrating the DOS-TP terms. Now, the last little bit of the talk, you can look for contact information. It's all in the README. Is part of the goal of the project is how it's used. MAxO's is intended to be used for annotations for diseases and for disease phenotypes. One of the ways we're doing this is by building this annotation website that is just starting to be available for other people to also curate. It shows annotations between Mondo disease, HPO, human phenotype ontology, if you're not familiar with it, and MAxO. You can request a login from Mike Gargano, but I will say we're not quite ready to be live. We want to invite some physicians with particular expertise to try to go through this. But if you have interest in using this as well, we would invite you to look at these. So it's a little bit best to go through just any kind of disease. This is a disease that is found in OMIM, and here's the Mondo ID. These are the different phenotypes that are associated with this disease, and this one was recently added, and a person needs to review it. And when you review it, you look at all of it. Let's see. Does it display? Let me go back. I guess it has the information. So this is the reference of where the information is coming from. This is the HBO term. There's no clinical modifiers, but if you know, the evidence is from a traceable author statement, and you can have additional information about it. So these are the annotations to the disease. So treatments are annotations to the phenotypes in general. And these are the different ones that have been added. So you can see for urinary urgency, there are different medications that can be added. So here is the PubMed article that referenced that. And this is a treatment. You can, I believe, maybe I'll go back here and try to add, let's see. Sorry, it's been a while since I've done this. Urinary urgency is up here. You can add, so once you type in the term, it generally comes up, although I do suggest having another version of the ontology to go through. Sometimes it does not pull up the terms that exist. You can add that it treats, prevents, investigates. In this case, treats. It has a published clinical study, and you need to add the PMID here. You can add any of these or add a new one if you know the PubMed record. Let's see. I'm going to cancel this out because I think Sabrina already added this exact one here. Because so one thing I didn't mention, and I should include in the README file, I do not include every single drug that is out there in as a treatment in MAxO, partly because obviously there's so many drugs that it would not be possible. So under urinary, any kind of pharmacotherapy, this one in specifically, you can find the KEBI term for this. And I mean, I'm just going to type in the example here because I don't know offhand what is the, I'll just add this one. So say this is the correct drug that falls under this category. And it should be something that has a role of urinary antispasmodic agent therapy. So you can give in a kind of information, and you can add additional comments there for any sort of annotation. And if you want to look to see what annotations are currently available, there's manage, and you select medical action ontology. Currently, it's all unstable because it's still in development, but you can download, and it's a TSV file that you can look at all the annotations that are, let's see, downloads. Not sure where that's going, but it's a TSV file for all the information here that of all the accepted terms and all their annotations. And so that is a big project that is ongoing that we will continue to work on in the future. Let's see.
And I will just hop in that we did have a huddle in September on Poet. So if you're curious to learn more about Poet, I pasted that in the chat. And you guys, anyone should be able to access that and watch it. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So I added a few other things that I know either other groups are using MAxO or will be using MAxO. There is a rare disease group in Perth, Australia that is using them. I don't know their use cases. We're trying to set up a meeting, but they, we're working with them for their terms that they need. So they clearly have a current use. This has been ongoing with a little bit stops and starts, and my lab, Peter Robinson's lab, is identifying terms through gene reviews. If you're not familiar with gene reviews, it's has all the different diseases, and they have general review by experts. They have usually a management section which has diagnostics and treatments in there, and also differential diagnoses between some of the subtypes of diseases. So there's a wealth of information here, and so we have been mining, trying to identify MAxO terms from the management section, and we started that early on, but weren't able to get very far because MAxO wasn't sufficiently large enough. Now that MAxO is larger, we are trying again and having definitely more success pulling out MAxO terms. Tritabolone, this is a European group that does very specific treatment recommendations for different diseases, especially the subclasses of certain diseases. We've worked with them. MAxO is not currently available, but HPO terms are. And this is like the soup, obviously it says beta release, but you can, go and search. And they have something similar. They have different, 8 treatments associated and various phenotypes. Most of these are pharmacological treatments for obvious reasons. So MAxO doesn't specifically annotate to them. We do it through CABI. But again, we are working with this group to possibly get MAxO involved, and definitely integrating HPO into their system. So just to give a shout out to them. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And unless you need specifics or somebody can teach me what I'm doing wrong on some of my markdown on my README file. But other than that,
Looks like Sean maybe has a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's really nice example of how templates are used, and like it's really, really cool what you guys are doing. Just got a few questions. I see it that initially you had some stuff with avoidance, and you said that's a negative thing. I was wondering if you guys use how you guys did any negative thing. Is it just you use a heavier reasoner, or do you guys use ELK like most of us? In which case, how do you deal with negatives?
yeah, so I mean, we do use ELK as a reasoner, and it is problematic, and that is actually, there's not a GitHub ticket, but I'm trying to work with Chris Mungle for what would be the appropriate way to do it. That's the short answer. Let's see. CT avoidance. Avoid CT. Yeah, so we created a term, avoided medical action, to work with to be able to try to deal with that.
Okay.
I think that is something that we worked through, Nico and I worked through, and I know Chris Mungle has had a little bit of issue with that. So this will be definitely worked on in the future, but this is the current state of things.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely something I think a lot of us struggle with. And yeah, I guess that answers my other question, which is that do you use the reasoning to avoid certain treatments and anything? I guess without that negative being used in the reasoner, it's not quite at that functional stage yet. Yeah. I mean, I've got another question, but I see Ramona has her hand up.
You
let her
can go
ask.
ahead, Sean. I'll ask after you.
All right. I was just wondering, I know this is because Nico is involved in this. I know this is one of his dreams kind of thing, to use like patterns to have workflows. So like if certain things are to have checks and automated checks with patterns. I was wondering if you guys implemented anything with that or yeah.
Yeah, I didn't report when so I do look at the reports. There are reports every time there's a release that I go through. There are some, you know, it depends which ones you go through, but some of these are technical. The DOS-DP says they're missing definitions, but
No,
most of
I
these-
don't mean this so much. I think this is part of the ODK suite of checks.
Ah.
But I was just wondering, like, as in, like, I know Nico has been like dreaming of having this system where there's these fixed patterns of things that can go in, and if it's not there, it pings or something like that. And I guess it was a dream that I thought he implemented it somewhere, and I was seeing if you guys were.
I think, do you mean Ufino maybe?
I think Ufino is one of them that he looked into that kind of stuff a lot, and we've been trying to implement it with Uberon, and at least Uberon. I mean, I'm the lazy one, so yeah, it's my fault that it's not quite there yet. But yeah, no, I mean, it's just really cool to see this. I was just wondering if you guys did anything like that, and if anything we could copy, basically. But no worries.
No, yeah. So I mean, I am involved with Ufino and trying to pattern HBO. But this is something that's very similar, although HPO doesn't, you know, we have the patterns in there and we use the logical definitions from the patterns, and we try to make sure that all of the terms are like that, but it's not automated. This is automated, and if you go through the wiki, it'll show you how to use the different robot commands to automate these patterns. I mean, I can show you.
I mean, no worries. I think I yeah, because I've gone through the tutorial before, and I think it's similar given it's ODK. But thanks so much for that.
Yeah, sorry if I'm not answering your question.
No,
Maybe
no,
reach
no,
out to
you
Nico.
definitely did.
Okay, Ramona, I guess.
Yeah, thanks so much for the presentation, Lee. I'm not part of the Monarch initiative, but Emily Hartley and I here on this call, Nico invited the two of us because we're working on the critical path ontology. And I think we've probably exchanged some comments on GitHub. And so my question pertains to that topic, which is, how do you coordinate with OB, and how do you know how do I know when something should go in OB versus MAxO? It's a really tough question, but I just want to say I better appreciate why you're doing what you're doing separately after this call.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit of a draw line. We have imported biopsy terms and things like that from OB. Though we might try to narrow it with the logical definitions that it's biopsy of a human patient or some sort of way. Some of the techniques will be ELISAs or various other techniques can be used in both ways and are very similar, but because we will be using EHR records and things like that, we do want to narrow it to clinically relevant. And again, I'm hesitating to say that it has to be a CLIA certified type procedure, because theoretically some other procedure could be used, but yeah, I that is the direction I'm moving, that it needs to be used in one of the diagnostics, prevention of or therapeutics for a patient specifically, and not in the research realm. And I have a research background, so all of my papers would probably fall under OB, but yeah, this is supposed to be in recommendations for what to do for a patient.
So could you see a future, and no is a totally fine answer, where there are terms in OB like that might be relevant for a human or for preclinical research, but then there's a human centric or clinical centric term subclass of that would go into MAxO?
Yeah, maybe a child term, yeah, that is a little bit more specific, or and for various reasons, I did talk about like making MAxO from the beginning, narrowing it down to human or clinical use in the initial definition. So therefore everything underneath would be that narrow. But I haven't, but that again is on the table, and so maybe that requires a bigger discussion of what the best way, because again, I don't think there's one way, but that's definitely a way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, and I fully appreciate the need, like OB is a big and cumbersome ontology, and I appreciate that you have a need to do your work and get things out quickly. But it's just challenging for someone like us who wants to use both ontologies sometimes to know where we need to go. So if my request, I guess, would be to like try to reach some agreement with the OB community to have clear delineation about, okay, if you want this, request it here, if you want this, request it there, so that the users know where to go.
Well, I mean, it's good to have input from the users, and I appreciate it. I think it's going to be a bigger discussion with people who are better at discussing these things.
And this is probably somewhat off topic for this call, so I'm sorry. I don't want to take up the whole.
No. Again, it's important to know, like, if you're a potential user, it would be helpful to know what your needs are. So okay. I do appreciate that. Will it be implemented immediately? No. But I will definitely try.
Yeah. Okay, Nicole has her hands up, so we should leave time for her.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, Lee, I wonder, I think there's a good question, Ramona, about drawing the line. What is the scope between OB and what's the scope between MAxO? I wonder maybe if we could also XREF OB and MAxO, because like we do that in Mondo too, if an OB term, if there's an ELISA and an ELISA class and MAxO, could we XREF the ELISA class or have some kind of relationship between
XREFs
the
are
OB
okay,
class?
but I'd rather see an actual OWL relationship between them, or SCOS.
Yeah. Or say some kind of way to connect the two of
I think
them.
our XREFs get built into bridges eventually, so it will be equivalent relationship eventually if you build that pipeline. I think that's the ideal with the XREF.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, especially on the upper level, have tried to include XREFs for it. I will say with the more specific and rapid terms, more have fewer XREFs, and probably that revision needs to be made. I did do a lot of work initially, but at least by definitions by NCIT, but I have since tried to move away from that, partly because the structure of NCIT is not ideal for ontology work. Although a lot of the definitions are, it kind of depend, textual definitions, I should say, are very helpful. But if I can get primary resources, and PMIDs and things like that, I do try to go that route, but point taken.
Lee, I have one more comment that was related to something else that you said. I don't know if you know that Melissa has a really deep interest in veterinary informatics, and she's hired Katie, who's on the call, who's a vet postdoc in our group, to kind of help standardize veterinary data. And Katie and Sabrina have been working on the vertebrate breed ontology. I wonder if ultimately, and right now you said that right now MAxO is just focusing on human and clinical procedures. I wonder if later MAxO might want to add procedures that are used in like veterinary procedures, or have some kind of way of noting that something's relevant for, you know, for like the vet procedures and diagnostics that they do.
Yeah,
Just
no,
something to
I
keep
mean,
in
that
mind.
was that was a brief discussion early on, and that's why we didn't narrow it, but yeah, we'll have to, definitely potential, either a branch. I'm not sure how we would deal with that, but that's definitely an
Yeah.
interesting thought.
That's something we've been working on at Mondo lately too. Sabrina's been working on differentiating human diseases versus non-human animal diseases. So you could also take the similar approach that we've done in Mondo, depending on how it works out for us.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna stop sharing unless there's.
Cool. Yeah. Is there any last questions? We have a couple minutes left. That was great, Lee. Thank you very much.
And please put GitHub tickets or email me. I definitely am interested, and I'll work as fast as I can, but your point of view will definitely help the future of MAxO.
Great.